Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, violence flares on Israel's borders, with fire from Lebanon now joining the daily attacks from Hamas in Gaza. Israel's coronavirus czar, Professor Gamzu, reports disaster as education authorities give another green light to start the school year on time. And finally, Israeli star singer Netta Barzilai keeps us connected amidst an ongoing pandemic. Our top news tonight, a stabbing in central Israel's Petah Tikva. The victim, a 35-year-old Israeli man who has now reportedly succumbed to his wounds. The suspect, on the other hand, is a Palestinian man residing in Israel who, by some accounts, has a work permit, while other reports say that he was here illegally. Either way, he's been arrested and is in questioning. Motive for the attack still unclear. Meanwhile, this comes after yet another round of violence against Israel overnight. But this time, in addition to the Hamas-led attacks along the boundary with the Gaza Strip, shots were fired from Lebanon towards IDF troops in Israel's north. The IDF responding with fire and airstrikes targeting Hezbollah observation posts near the border. So what exactly happened along the northern border with Lebanon Tuesday night, leading to Israeli residential curfews and retaliation from Israeli attack copters and fighter jets? Joining us to discuss is former head of Israeli Air Force intelligence, Brigadier General Ramzy. Thanks so much for being with us. Now, this is the first time in a long time that the IDF Air Force has attacked Hezbollah positions in Lebanon. But this is far from the only recent Hezbollah attack against Israel. So what changed?
We were waiting for such a retaliation for the killing of one of their combatant men in Syria a couple of months and a half ago. And the snipers a couple of weeks ago that we caught them. And now there is another retaliation. In between, we have to remember that beside the corona, we have also the crisis that happened with the damage, the devastating damage in port of Beirut. So in context, it's a small retaliation that have us we had to retaliate, so we attack back. But this is not the big picture. The big picture that the Hezbollah is under pressure both under the corona crisis and the crisis of money that they don't have in Lebanon, and another thing about what happened in Beirut. And all of those put a lot of pressure on Hezbollah. On one hand, we don't care about Israel. We have other problems. But on the other hand, they have to strike to reaffirm their position in Lebanon scenario. So in a sense, it's not a big issue what's happened last night, but when someone is under pressure, you have to be very cautious because an organization like Hezbollah, a terror organization under pressure, they can initiate another terror attack in order to exploit it to their needs internally.
So with
as
all...
I said,
So with all of that in mind, understanding Hezbollah's position, so to speak, and maybe trying to save face, was there anything unique or different about Israel's response last night?
It was very minor response in order to calm down and not to escalate the situation, because the situation doesn't have any. There is no need and there is no interest, especially for Israel, to escalate the situation. Nevertheless, they know that we can retaliate harder, much harder. They know the situation that they have internally, and we hope that it will be the last collision in the next couple of months, as I predict.
Well, so again, I mean, I want to push on that a little further, because there are currently, as you alluded to, a lot of fears that this event will lead to an even greater escalation. Again, given the pressure that Hezbollah is under, how likely is that?
I agree. As I said, if there was a kind of atmosphere that no other problems around, I will tell you in confidence, nothing will happen more than what's happened last night. Nevertheless, the situation and the pressure that they are under it now might cause them to initiate a kind of a suicide kind of initiative in order to serve their own interests internally.
All right, Brigadier General, thank you so much.
Always pleasure.
In other news, United States Secretary of State Mike Pompeo is still in the Middle East on tour in the wake of the Israel-UAE normalization deal.
Landing in Manama, Bahrain on Tuesday, United States Secretary of State Mike Pompeo advocating for other regional powers to follow the United Arab Emirates' footsteps, getting closer with Israel. And this follows Pompeo's similar visit to Sudan and Jerusalem, where he recorded his speech for the Republican National Convention. But things in general seem to be going well now in this new Middle East, several Gulf states showing interest in normalizing with Israel, like the UAE. The first direct Israel-UAE commercial flight set to take off next week with official American and Israeli delegations.
הנחיתי את ראש המטה לביטחון לאומי, מאיר בן שבת, לצאת בראש משלחת ישראלית מקצועית לשיחות באיחוד האמירויות בשבוע הבא. המשלחת הזאת תפעל יחד עם צוות אמריקני שגם הוא יבוא לשם, יחד עם צוות מקביל של איחוד האמירויות, לקדם את השלום והנורמליזציה בין ישראל לאיחוד האמירויות.
The Palestinians, however, still rejecting the latest moves, criticizing Israel and the Arab states who may normalize for supposedly stabbing Ramallah in the back.
لن يتحقق من خلال القفز عن الفلسطينيين نحو تطبيع العلاقات مع دول عربية ولن يتم بصيغة وهم السلام مقابل السلام بل إنه يتم على أساس قرارات الشرعية الدولية ومبادرة السلام العربية ما يعني عقد اتفاق سلام مع الفلسطينيين.
Still, with no progress in nearly 30 years, Israel and several neighboring countries are moving forwards and away from the status quo stalemate. Even Morocco is walking back previous refusals, hinting that ties may be possible, but without further elaboration.
Now, changing gears, a new amendment to the Marriage Act in the Netherlands is now empowering Dutch judges to help put an end to so-called chained spouses. Civil separations being another matter entirely, in Orthodox Judaism, a marriage contract can only be dissolved with a get, or a written religious consent of divorce. Without one, spouses, and typically the wives, become known as chained or separated but unable to remarry in the Jewish tradition. Well, this new Dutch amendment now lets court officials oblige individuals to comply with divorce proceedings, religious or otherwise. Those resisting the orders then are risking fines and even arrest warrants active across the whole of the European Union. This making the Netherlands just the second country in the world after Israel to pass such legislation. So what are the primary facets to the chained spouse issue, and what are some ways to avoid becoming chained in the first place? Joining me with answers is modern Orthodox rabbi, historian, and founder of ILTV, the Jewish Life Information Center of Israel, Rabbi Seth Farber. Rabbi, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, now before we look at the new Dutch solution to chained spouses, explain maybe what this divorce refusal actually is and on what religious Jewish basis it's supported.
This is a very painful issue in Jewish life. Divorce in Judaism can only happen if both couples agree to it. And unfortunately today, some couples, either side, the man or the woman, takes advantage of this to essentially persecute, ruin the life of their spouse by refusing to either accept a divorce or give a divorce. In the past couple of decades, the issue of get refusal has become a really painful moment for particularly Orthodox Jews like myself, where women generally are basically being told, hey, unless you give up all rights to custody or to finances or whatever, you can't get divorced at all, and you're locked into this relationship forever.
And you mentioned, because I know that this incident happens most often with chained wives, so to speak, but you made mention that there are chained husbands as well?
Well, Jewish tradition allows for either side of the couple to refuse to either grant a get, that is a Jewish divorce, or accept it. And because of that, today, either side can hold the other one captive. In general, it happens with men holding women, holding their wives, or more accurately, their ex-wives captive. And that's something we, in the organization that I run, E-Team, are trying to stop.
All right, Rabbi Seth Farber, thank you again so much for joining us. And for those watching at home, if you want to see more or learn more, please go to eteam.org.il. Thank you again, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Now, just a few days remain ahead of the start of the Israeli school year, but is Israel prepared? Well, many fear that the answer may be no, given the dire warnings still coming out from the Israeli health authorities. Coronavirus cases still rising sharply in Israel. Israeli COVID-19 czar, Professor Gamzu, now hinting that he may resign if the public doesn't get on board with his efforts to reduce the rate of infection soon. In particular, Gamzu is criticizing the Arab and ultra-Orthodox Jewish communities for their part in continuing to ignore regulations.
מה שאנחנו רואים בצורה מאוד מאוד ברורה ומאוד מדאיגה זה החברה הערבית. אף על פי שהתופעה הזאת קורית ואף על פי שאני אמרתי את מה שאמרתי לפני 10 ימים, עדיין מתרחשות בחברה הערבית חתונות, מסיבות, זה באמת אסון.
In spite of the warnings, though, Gamzu's reiterating passionately that lockdowns are the absolute last measure that he wants to enforce. Ministers instead extending virus regulations until the start of the school year. And school in the Holy Land is nearly in session. Millions of Israelis preparing for their returns from summer break.
אנחנו נפתח את שנת הלימודים ב-1 בספטמבר. הדבר הזה מתבצע בהתאם להחלטת הממשלה והולך באופן יציב לאורך כל השנה. המערכת הזו, מערכת החינוך, שנמצאים בה 2.4 מיליון תלמידים ו-200,000 מורים, המערכת הזו היא מערכת מרכזית.
ובאמת זה לא פשוט לפתוח שנת לימודים ב1.9, לא פשוט. יש מדינות בעולם שהיו בכלל לא שואלות השאלה, לא היו פותחות.
Still, concerns abound. Israeli authorities starting the process of closing coronavirus quarantine hotels to allow them to prepare for guests in the coming holidays, all while daily infection rates climb by over 2,000 again. The new total in Israel reaching to over 107,000 sick, nearly 20,600 currently ill, 430 in serious condition, and the death toll nearing 870. Now, the Portuguese passport has been catching the eyes of many Israelis recently thanks to the many European benefits that come with it. But which Jews exactly are eligible to receive this passport, and are non-Jews eligible as well? Well, to answer these questions, joining us in the studio is advocate Michael Decker, expert on immigration law at the Cohen, Decker, Pex & Brosh law firm. Thank you so much for being with us today.
With pleasure.
All right, now my first question is, again, under the Portuguese law, who is eligible to receive this benefit?
So basically, anyone that can prove that he's a descendant of Sephardic Jews is eligible to receive a Portuguese passport. I can explain a bit more. We basically separate the candidates into 3 categories. So you have the first category, and because in 1492 there was the expulsion from Spain, and then in 1497 from Portugal. And most of the Jews, in vast majority, found refuge either in North Africa, so we're dealing with countries like Morocco, Tunis, Algiers, Louvre, or in the previous Ottoman Empire. So we're dealing there with Turkey, Greece, the Balkan states of like Bulgaria, Serbia, Bosnia, and then we're dealing with the Mediterranean Sea coast countries.
That's a lot, though. A lot of people really fall under this.
Syria, Lebanon, and Egypt.
So a lot of people really fall under this umbrella here.
All the Jews in the countries I just mentioned are basically Sephardic Jews, because when they arrived in these countries, the local Jewish communities that existed were not as significant, and they basically took over also ethnically and also culturally. So Jews from those countries are almost eligible.
But how do you go about proving this? Like, what documents do you need to have to go through with this process?
So first of all, if you're from those countries, it's really easy because you just more or less need to prove that your ancestors come from there, and usually it's just maybe a parent, a grandparent. It will be rare today there will be a great-grandparent. But then you have other categories, because Sephardic Jews went all over the world. So you can find them also in other Muslim-ruled countries like Iran, which used to be Persia, Iraq, which used to be Babylon, Yemen, where Jews say they were there since the First Temple period. And there you had significant local Jewish communities before the expulsion. So from those countries, we would need much more proof. Also, Ashkenazi countries. You have Sephardic Jews that went to Romania, Poland, Germany, Austria, Czechoslovakia, Lithuania, you had a large amount of Sephardic Jews. But from those countries, because it's not so clear that you're a Sephardic Jew, we have a whole team of historians and genealogists in our office that write actual reports for people like this to prove the actual link between them and the Sephardic Jew that may have migrated there.
It's a little bit more complicated. All right, so what about non-Jews? Because we've talked about Sephardic and Ashkenazi. What about non-Jews who want to apply for this?
Well, just like the Ashkenazi Jews who aren't Sephardic today but have links to Sephardic Jews, non-Jews, in the eyes of Portugal at least, it's not a Jewish state. It's a,
Sure.
They
It's
made
really
a
just
law.
if you were expelled during that time.
Yeah,
And
you just need to prove that you're a descendant of someone that was expelled. So you have all the Jews that didn't leave in 1492 were basically forced to become Christian because the Spanish Empire, which was Christian, basically gave them two options: either convert to Christianity or leave. And the Jews that stayed became what's called like new Christians, Moranos. Many of them went to South America with the conquest of Spain, and many of their descendants are also descendants of Sephardic Jews.
All right, well, I understand the rumor has it that the Portuguese government is soon going to stop or at least limit the amount of time the window that you have to apply for this benefit. So I encourage anybody who's interested in learning more about whether or not they're eligible to visit lawoffice.org.il/en. And thank you so much, Michael.
It's a real pleasure. Thank you.
All right, now for those of you who still can't travel abroad or qualify for a brand new foreign passport, Visit to Israel is joining us again with some must-see places to visit right here in the Holy Land. Locations that even many Israelis don't always know about. And joining us with the details is Israeli tour guide Ilyana Pasentin. Thank you so much. It's so great to have you back.
Thank you.
All right, so first, what's our first location this week?
So in the Binyamin region is famous for its beautiful layer springs. What's a layer spring? The mountains are limestone. So when it rains, there are breaks and fissures and the water penetrates into the limestone until it reaches a layer of marl, which has the consistency of clay, and that's where the water springs right out of the mountain. What we did in the town of Eli many years ago is we took all of our teenagers and we dug a water hole. So there are swimming pools out in the nature, Mayan Hagvura and Ein Oz and many, many other springs all over the region.
Oh my gosh. All right. Well, and I understand that we have another place. It's called the Spring of Heroism.
Yeah, the Spring of Heroism that's Mayan Hagvura.
Oh, okay.
It's in memory of a lot of people that were killed in different terror attacks and wars over the years. We decided that a spring of life is the way we're going to remember those who fell in different wars. And that was our community project. What's special about the Binyamin region is that there's a park ranger named Baruch Odesser, and he goes from spring to spring. He cleans out the algae. He brings teenagers and workers and volunteers with him to make sure that there's no garbage, clean waters, and always a great site for a picnic.
So it's family friendly, I presume.
Definitely family friendly.
All right. So what, are there maybe places to stay overnight? What is built around the springs to support this kind of tourism?
So after you've been to Mayan Hagvura, the Gvura Spring, and Ein Oz, you either hike there or bike there, ATV there. There's a great place to stay called Kedem Ofra. It's in the town of Ofra. It's a beautiful bed and breakfast complex. Wow. And what's interesting is the story behind the scenes. It was a Jordanian army camp. It was just a wreck. And the young couple, Inbal Levy from Ofra, they renovated it. It is beautiful, boutique, with a jacuzzi and a swimming pool and a place to eat. And
they renovated it from scratch, or did they maybe restore it a little?
They did a little bit of restoration, and yeah, definitely. And there are signs that explain the whole story. It's amazing.
Well, it sounds like a really, really cool place to go, and especially now with coronavirus, all the more reason to maybe do some local tourism.
Especially because it's out in the mountains with the fresh air.
Yeah.
You can literally leave the bed and breakfast on a horse and go horseback riding. You can walk to a workshop there's so much to do with families and couples in the region.
That's amazing. It sounds so much fun. Ilyana, thank you so much for sharing about it.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
All right, now in these challenging times, we've all had to sacrifice something. Maybe it's travel or a dating or social life. For Israeli star singer Netta Barzilai, though, it's connection. But she's been hard at work to try and find a solution. Nittany Manson with the story.
The smash hit Netta Barzilai, with her unique and powerful style, has been shooting higher and higher ever since taking gold at the 2018 Eurovision Song Competition. But things were soon to change for everyone. The deadly coronavirus pandemic spreading across the world and shutting everything down in its path. Months of closures and hardships, including in relationships lying ahead.
Usually, one of my most fun parts was to sit and ride in a coffee shop and look at people, and you can't really see them anymore. They're there, but there's more barriers now that we've got to have to learn how to break.
One of Barzilai's newer singles, Cuckoo, now taking on new meaning then, distancing orders making us feel trapped.
I'm like a bird in a cage and I'm going cuckoo, cuckoo. I know that I can escape, but I don't want to hurt you, hurt you.
The melody turns inside in a loop, in an infinity loop that turns and turns and turns forever. Like the melody is caged and like this beautiful sad rhyme is caged. So this for me describes this period of time.
Well, from the struggle came an opportunity to turn lemons into lemonade and to reconnect with fans.
This whole quarantine situation made me actually get into my studio, and it made me create. I had nowhere to run, no bar to go sing at, no friends to meet. And I just needed a way to engage with my fans and to engage with my audience. So I made up Netta's Office, which is what you see here.
In a podcast-like format, Netta releases periodic 20-minute episodes where she performs and communicates with her fans. But more than just an outlet, Barzilai uses her new platform to advocate for those who haven't been as lucky.
Obviously, being closed in these four walls gave me all of the opportunities I figured out all I needed was this room in an artistic way. But to say I'm grateful for this is wrong, because yesterday I had a conversation with one of my former employees telling me that he couldn't feed his children. When you think about how much money I'm making or how much money an artist makes, he supports hundreds of people behind him. And when you think culture and art is a privilege, you're so wrong. It's a necessity.
I'm like a bird in a cage and I'm going cuckoo, cuckoo.
And now let's take a look at the weather forecast. Weather tonight should be clear to partly cloudy with lows averaging 71 degrees Fahrenheit or 22 degrees Celsius. Then tomorrow you can expect a slight drop in temperatures as the highs fall to around 90 Fahrenheit or 32 degrees Celsius. And of course, before we go, let's take a look at what's going viral now in Israel. Oh my God, what an awesome party. Look at these dance moves. So I can see that this is just a film of bats upside down put to music, but it's brilliant. Wish I could party with them. Oh man. All right, that is it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.4 shekels to the American dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube and Roku TV pages. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you so much for watching.